Occupation Station. I'm your host, Michael, a child and adolescent occupational therapist. And with me today is my co-host, Eleanor.
I'm also a child and adolescent occupational therapist.
And I keep forgetting to mention she is my boss as well.
I know.
I know.
We've had a good couple of weeks.
I know. We're back to that. How's your week been?
It's been pretty good. I'm getting ready to go on holidays.
Yeah,
coming
that's
up
right.
soon, which is exciting. Just want to make sure everything's done and dusted before I go away.
Exciting.
How's your week been?
Yeah, fine. Pretty standard week. Had some fun sessions yesterday with some clients.
That's awesome.
And that was good. And otherwise, getting some decent sleep at the moment, which certainly helps.
Wins all round.
Wins all round. Well, today, as you know, for those who have tuned in before, we have a Q&A style format. So we'll discuss how we can best support the young people in our lives and find the fun in doing this. We'll take your questions, throw in some of our own, and hopefully provide some insight. So if you do have any questions you'd like answered, please feel free to send them through to our Instagram, which is OTFC Group. Otherwise, the old-fashioned email, podcast@otfcgroup.au. So we'll get straight into some questions we had through the week. I got some of these are from parents who have, through clinic sessions as well, have asked us or other therapists some questions, which I think is a good way to take some of that feedback and answer some of their questions as well. So we had one around good exercises to support core control without knowing that you're doing core control activities, which I like.
We love those kinds of activities, don't we?
Yes. Another one was on how to pick the right school. And there was one question here about mouthing items and teeth grinding, which I might start with if that's okay.
Sounds good.
And the reason I'm starting there is because you came in this morning saying you had a headache, and one of our other team members mentioned, you've been grinding your teeth maybe.
Yeah. Everyone made that assumption. That's where that had come from.
Yeah. So full disclosure, I'm a bit of a grinder at times at night. So I know that sometimes when I wake up, it's probably because I've been grinding my teeth a bit.
Oh, okay. There you go.
So I can confirm that is a potential reason. Not that we're talking about why we get headaches. but
or what my problems are.
No, absolutely not. Well, you're on holidays. Maybe you're stressed about your holiday coming up. But mouthing items, teeth grinding, oral motor seeking, if you call it that, or oral motor input and what that might be indicating. Grinding is an interesting one because I know that, and I don't know if you've worked with any kids who are grinders or children who do grind, but often that could be a behaviour response or some way of it being a response to something else that's going on.
Yeah.
So they're using grinding or they're mouthing items as a way to support other things that are happening. And grinding is an interesting one because grinding can go throughout the lifespan. And I was actually having a conversation with a client yesterday talking about mouthing items over the lifespan.
Yeah.
And it can start as, you might mouth things when you're younger and they might turn to something else when you're older and you might find you chew gum a lot more or some of those sensory preferences can change over time.
Had this been something that they had voiced to you or something that they were eager to explore as part of their sessions together?
Yeah, a combination of things, I think. I think sometimes it was unpacking why we go to those supports and why we seek the mouth. And I remember talking about, young kids who, I'm a big advocate of music and using music as a form of, regulation. So mouthing items could be I've seen such and such mouth a lot of items. Can you throw a harmonica in there? Can you throw a recorder in there?
Love those ones.
As a way to support what they're looking for, but also giving them a functional way of doing it.
Because I guess when it comes to why they might be doing that, like you said, if that's input that they're seeking, there's lots of receptors in the mouth that gets a lot of sensory input. So for those that are seeking something intrinsically to help them regulate, feel more organised, perhaps they're feeling unsure about what's happening around them or things that are coming up, and their body, their nervous system just is naturally seeking out these opportunities that help them feel good within themselves, better able to navigate the spaces that they're in. And it's interesting then to go, are there other things that we can do to build out that toolbox? Is that indicating that they're seeking sensory opportunities more broadly? So if we would incorporate other sensory elements, so if we're able to give them other opportunities to move and experience different sensory experiences, does that help to then reduce how much they might be mouthing or grinding or things like that?
So the example is mouthing, grinding as what does that maybe indicate or how can we support that? I go back to the bigger picture of what sensory input is needed for that child, and what are small tools that we can use, small regulation tools, and what are the big overhaul, big body things.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
That are going to support us. I find that I am quite and I reflect back. I play music. I play clarinet, for example, and maybe that was because I was always someone who was seeking oral input.
Yeah.
And music is a way for me to regulate. And I chew gum, and I often have a pen in my mouth when I'm thinking of stuff, and maybe just that's my regulation tool, is to use things in the mouth. One thing I did want to mention, I was just jotting it down, was the sensory homunculus. Have you seen the sensory homunculus?
Yeah, I do.
For those that don't know, Google sensory homunculus. It is the weirdest thing, but it gives you a really, really good idea of why the mouth is such a strong sensory regulator. Because, again, I've been doing this a lot in podcasts where I'm trying to discuss something that's visual, and I'll try my best. So one is the picture of the person, the sensory homunculus person, and then there's the another image which can be spliced alongside it, which is the image of the brain, and which parts of the brain have innovations to the sensory parts of the body. So it's fingers, mouth, eyes, feet, the whole body. Yeah, and you'll see a significant portion is dedicated towards the mouth.
Yeah.
Right.
And in this image, right, then it's meant to be a representation with that innovation like you spoke about, that it's highlighting if there's more innovation to certain areas that appears larger, where if it's less innovation that looks smaller. So it looks like a disproportionate representation of a person, but it's actually a proportionate representation of those sensory connections.
Absolutely. Yeah. The nervous system and its innovations and neural pathways and the input. And yes, that's why it looks weird. But so when I think about mouthing items or grinding or anything to do with the mouth, it makes sense why people go to that first. It makes sense why children mouth items when they're very young. It's their first form of exploration for a lot of them.
Yeah.
And it makes sense why a lot of children who have difficulties with being able to communicate or have difficulties with being able to explore their world in other ways might still mouth items. It's why lots of children with, say, intellectual disabilities or with, high needs may engage in pica or putting non-food items in their mouth because it is a way of exploring and regulating, and it's helping their sensory systems, and it's actually listening to that that sensory homunculus. So my first response to anyone that's explaining or exploring this person's mouthing a lot or they're grinding or anything like that is to go exactly as you said. What is maybe causing that to happen? Why are they seeking that out? Yeah. Are there some bigger things at play? The one I get a lot of is they're biting their clothing at school. Yeah, that is a big one, isn't it? Or they're putting things in their mouth at school. Yeah. But it's good that they're finding things to regulate themselves. They're actually trying to self-regulate.
Yeah, they are.
Right? So you can just try and identify what helps in a more effective way. But ultimately, it's very much this person is trying to regulate. Grinding provides that deep pressure in the mouth that if you clench your teeth together and then unclench, you'll feel the difference. Release, isn't it? It's a release, And you chew gum because it gets that same input. We talk about interoception a bit as well. You can practice it. You can go clench your teeth for 5 seconds, then release it. How does your mouth feel? Yeah. And you'll feel the difference.
Absolutely.
So
what are some other things that you like to have in the toolbox for those that might be seeking that input specifically via oral means?
I've always been particularly for the younger ones, breathing, blowing, bubbles, straws. I mean, I still do it, I was going to say I still do it with my son, but sometimes now he drinks the water in the bath, which is not the best thing to do. But anyway, putting, soapy water in the bath and then just a big straw and
it's so good. We call that bubble monsters. Which is
exactly.
Just,
because what you're getting is the oral input, but you get the visual cause and effect stimuli, and it's motivating and it's regulating. Yeah. The
more you blow into the straw, the bigger the bubbles get. And so then it's, encouraging that kind of cycle a little bit to keep moving through.
100%. That's probably one of my favourite ones. As I said, music, love music. I mean, recorder's very loud for any parents out there. You get a recorder and it's, at 6 o'clock in the morning when you hear this very loud, that can be tricky. But harmonicas, any sort of oral musical instrument can be really effective. Or singing. Singing's great. You don't have to sing in tune. I mean, it helps if you do, but if you can't. I'm not looking at you for any reason.
You are looking at me. I can tell. But I love to have a sing, even though
you do.
I can tell why you were pitching that towards me. I enjoy it.
I was actually looking
at you.
Sing. That's okay, but I was looking at you to go, what are some things that you use? What are some things that you would recommend?
Yeah, I like a lot of the ones that you had said through there as well. I also enjoy, speaking of straws, little pom-pom races where you're trying to blow a pom-pom through a little course that you might have made. So maybe you've got even a bit of construction in there, a bit of crafts, something to support that. And then you're trying to move a pom-pom through a little race like that can be frustrating, but can also be lots of fun. I think incorporating things like crunchy snacks throughout the day so that, these little incidental things that you're putting in at different points. And I've heard some really clever things, for those that really go for the collar or something like that. Maybe they'll even have a little insert just inside. So they've got that, they're still getting that particular feedback. But maybe that's what they're replacing when the collar has had enough.
Yeah.
They're able, the shirt, the school uniform stays the same, but it's just this little piece of material that they've got access to, which gives that same input.
Yep.
Yeah, lots of different things like that. But I would say for those that are oral seeking, looking more broadly at things around a sensory diet, can we be giving bigger body movements, that proprioceptive input, vestibular through movement? Are there other things that we can also be utilising to give that range of sensory experiences to facilitate regulation, in addition to the things that young person has in their toolbox themselves to access when they need to?
And I guess in that you're talking about what we would define as sort of like a sensory diet, which I guess would be an offshoot of what our sensory integration therapy is. It's understanding those systems integrating, working together, and a sensory diet helps to give the body the sensory input it needs, hence the sensory diet.
Yeah, and we say diet not because you obtain that through food. I know we gave crunchy snacks as an example there, which might inform part of a sensory diet, but it's actually just saying for all of us, we need a range of sensory experiences across our day, much like we would various nutritional opportunities to make sure we're meeting our needs. So that's why the word diet is used there, but it's really just saying understanding that young person's sensory preferences and what their body needs, and then how do we incorporate that proactively and consistently throughout their day.
So an example then, if we go to the next question, if someone is seeking sort of bigger, intense movements, would something like core exercises help someone to provide quite a bit of that bigger body extension through, like say if they're trying to find, the question was, what are some good exercises to support core control?
Yeah. In a way that's fun.
And
maybe they don't know how hard they're working, which is, we were saying, our favourite kind of activities.
The core exercises, I would, based on how we would understand the systems, the sensory systems working, they would be targeting the same sort of big body movements, the muscles in the proprioceptive system to some extent.
One thing that I love for regulation and for core control is something that we call cannon kicks, where the young person is lying on their back. They might have their head propped up a little bit, so they're looking at their knees, and then their knees are in this tabletop kind of position, and you're throwing a gym ball or another ball towards them, and they're trying to kick out so that the ball comes back towards you.
I almost call it the cockroach position, where they're in this cockroach position where there's that hands and legs up.
Like a dead bug.
Yeah, right? And then you just chuck a ball at them. But sorry, continue.
And so then what they're doing when they're kicking the ball back to you, they're getting lots of that proprioceptive, that through the muscles, the joints, the tendons to activate that, but then they're also using their core so much to stabilize that position. And for young people who are finding that quite tricky, that might be difficult for them to maintain over a long period. But then it's saying, you're making a game out of it. How many can we do in a row? Let's see what's our best score. Let's try again another day. So they've got the regulation aspect, but then they've also got the opportunity to be working on their core muscles as well, which is cool.
The other thing that I was doing the other weekend at the playground was sitting in, the old style swings that just the sash.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just sitting in that without like a back behind you and trying to keep your legs up whilst you're swinging. That activates the core a lot more than I thought.
Yeah.
Like that's if we're talking about activities that don't look like you're doing that, there's probably a reason why some kids don't like those swings, is because of how much it does activate the core.
So true.
And it requires a lot of that input through, the vestibular system, but also that proprioceptive system working together to really feel that through the muscles and joints there. So, that was just one where I'm thinking straight away, this person get on one of those swings, see how they go.
Yeah, especially because something like that, if you're building your core muscles, and so it's hard to rely on that alone to stabilize that position, and you're holding on to the ropes, you might be using that upper limb coordination and strength to perhaps compensate for those difficulties, and it might become quite effortful. So even just thinking you could probably do a swing like that lying on your tummy instead, and they're swinging out to try and catch a ball from you or something like that. Because once again, that's still working those same muscles. It's in a novel and fun way. Because that prone position that we call that, where we are on our tummy and trying to keep our head up, it's why tummy time's so good for little kids, when they start building those core muscles in the first instance. But we can keep working towards that over time, just in different ways to keep building those core muscles through the tummy, the back and the neck, which really helps support those postures.
Some kids that I see come through sometimes there can be that history of they never liked tummy time.
Yeah.
Or they really avoided tummy time. And I think some of the core exercises can be avoided by some of those kids, maybe because of a previous experience. They didn't like it, and so they don't want to do that anymore. And so some of those just straight out core lying on your tummy Superman positions aren't as motivating.
Yeah.
And they may also have had a bad experience, therefore they don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
But I think that's where something like a gym ball is really useful. I love a gym ball. It's really versatile. And you can do the same activities, but in, I guess, a more fun way. It doesn't look like you're doing work way. And you mentioned the cannon kicks, but there are you could just search on the internet gym ball activities for kids, and I'm sure you'd find a whole range of them. Obviously, I'd still like an OT to oversee that to make sure it's the right thing for the person. But
even doing something like, playing board games while you're lying on your tummy on a gym ball, so you have to kind of roll out a little bit to play your card or have your turn, and you're rolling back. So once again, it's a bit of movement input for regulation, but the core muscles are working super hard to stabilize on there without falling off. And it is using something that maybe is a strength or an interest for that young person to support their engagement for longer. Maybe it is that same position lying on the floor with the Superman fly, like you said, where you're on your tummy, you lift your arms, your legs, your head all at the same time and try and hold that position for as long as you can. Some kids love the challenge of trying to beat their previous scores and getting their best time, and they'll come and tell you, I was able to hold it for this long this week, and seeing that progress. But for some, that's not motivating. But if you were to do a similar position, doing something that they enjoy, then you've got the same kind of outcomes, but you're building in things that they like to motivate them.
Last question then, motivation. Motivation for school can be really tricky, and then it comes back to the question about how to pick the right school.
Yeah.
Which, when we talk about what keeps parents up at night, this is certainly one that keeps parents up at night. What is the right school for my child? And I think for a neurotypical child, that's hard, let alone for a neurodivergent child or any child with additional needs. That can be a really tricky thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
is that something that you're thinking about?
Yeah. Personally, going through that myself.
Being ready for
with my
kindy and
own,
reception?
Yep, all those things. And a lot of conversations around school and the right fit. I think it can be very tricky for a number of reasons, though. And whenever I'm talking to parents or any families that come in about the right school, I think sometimes you can have the reputation of being a really good school, or you can have the reputation of having some very good teachers, which is great. But at the same time, I always encourage families to take their child to that place to see what it's like.
Yeah, get the feel for it.
To get a feel.
Yeah.
The hardest thing, and I learned this from my own experience, is a lot of schools, particularly the ones that are sought after, they get booked out.
Long wait lists. It's so
Huge
hard.
wait lists.
Yeah. I often hear Dino, who's our national director, talking about supporting in the right school choices when he gives talks with parents. And he had, with those wait lists in mind, and perhaps when you're doing that early planning, taking the opportunity to put yourself on multiple wait lists, so when the time comes, you have as much choice as you can, because it's so hard when thinking about a young person who's due to start at primary school and you're having to think about it when they're 2-3 years of age, and you don't know what it's going to look like in a couple of years' time, and even younger than that.
Earlier.
And so just keeping your options open as best you can if you're in a position to do so, I think can be super helpful, even when it gets to that time and you're going, okay, with the information we have, knowing with where my young person's at now, this is the choice that I feel is going to work best for them. So just, yeah, something to think about, especially like you mentioned for those with additional needs when you're maybe not sure what that's going to look like for them. So is it that we're considering small special schools or things like that? So it's an option on the table rather than perhaps coming up to that time and going, actually, we feel that an environment like that would best support their learning needs, but we're only looking to do that now and they're starting school next year.
I think the hard thing is as well, the school system doesn't suit everybody.
No.
And as much as that is, changing, I mean, 20 years ago it looked very different to what it does now. But there is still a lot that can be done and still a lot that needs to be done. I mean, in South Australia, we've got an assistant minister for autism, which is great. So we have people in various schools providing facilitation to support, say, autistic children. And that's a start, but it doesn't always guarantee that that's going to mean the school experience is the right one for that young person either.
And I think that's where having a question around how can we work together to support my young person? What supports are available? What can that look like for them? Knowing what their learning, communication, developmental differences might look like. How can that best be supported in the school space? I've got lots of families at the moment, actually, I think I'd mentioned previously, that are looking into high schools for next year. So lots of tours, just like you had mentioned, going out to the school, seeing what it looks like, meeting the leadership team there, maybe even some of the inclusive team, and just being able to ask from there, well, how can we work together to support them? Because I think the hardest thing might be when perhaps they're saying, oh, look, these are all the things that we have. But, I think as parents, of course, what your child needs the most. And it's just being okay to ask the questions that you feel that you need to and advocate for that as well and seeing what that conversation can look like.
And I guess we were initially going down, and that was on me thinking primary school, be absolutely right. The right school can also be the high school, because the high school is a big shift from primary school.
Yeah.
And for a lot of our clients, particularly the ones I see at the plus side at Mile End, those teenagers have had positive experiences at primary school, but high schools are a completely different environment. Yeah. And often we get real difficulty with within high school because it's just so different.
Yeah, and it's hard to tailor. I get I guess the current constructs of most of the schools that we have, it's hard to tailor to everyone's individual needs and balance and juggle what that looks like for every student in the classroom. But you just have to ask the questions that you need to.
So advocating for your child could be one of the first things that you're doing in terms of picking or choosing the right school is, one, knowing your child well. And I think almost all parents would know their child enough to know what might work for them.
Yeah.
But advocating is a separate thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
That can be really tricky to do.
It can be. And I think having someone to potentially help support in some of those conversations, whether it's a support person that you bring to meetings or if you do have an allied health team that can support in those conversations as well, your OT, speechy, psychologist, whatever that can look like for you, I think it's a really helpful thing to have in mind.
Yeah, great. Well, hopefully that gives a little bit more information on schools, core activities, and what to do if you're grinding or oral seeking.
Yeah.
All right, that sort of covers everything today, and kind of a bit of a dive into schools, a bit about tooth grinding and oral seeking, and also hopefully some fun activities to support core activities.
Yeah. Good mix this week.
Yeah. If you have any questions, again, OTFC Group on Instagram, otherwise the podcast at otfcgroup.au. And outside of that, we got one more thing we want to shout out.
Yeah, a little shout out to Fletch. If you're listening, hope you have a good day. We'll see you very soon.
See you all soon. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.